Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we are returning to Gary Grigsby's Eagle Day to Bombing the Reich, the new-ish 10-plus-year-old remake of Talonsoft's 12 O'Clock High Bombing the Reich, as well as the Talonsoft Eagle Day, which was a Battle of Britain game. This is the second video or stream I have made on Bombing the Reich as part of the series. The first one kicked off the week of the Apple TV series Masters of the Air aired the Regensburg raid, and we did that as well. As a result of that raid, our forces in Europe, or in England specifically, are somewhat dispersed. We have a large chunk of the 8th Air Force sitting here in North Africa. Several detachments of the 390th, 388th, 385th, 100th, 96th, 95th, 94th bomb groups all sitting in the desert. You can see here, for example, the 100th bomb group has 3 aircraft ready, 9 in maintenance, 12 being repaired. So considerable amount of this formation just kind of sitting in this base, rotting away. We do have some pilots stuck down here. John Egan is still surviving. Sitting down here, and then a couple other names that I recognize, as well as a bunch that I don't know if they're real or if they're fake or whatever, because the game kind of mixes in real pilots with fake pilots. But that being said, those formations are stuck down there while they're sort of parent formations, because the whole formation didn't fly. Some elements of them did stay home, are still up in England. For example, if we go to Thor Abbott's somewhere around here, isn't it? Here, Thorpe Abbott. You've got the core part of the 100th, which has 16 active bombers sort of sitting here in England. And these guys could fly. They could participate in raids. But I'd like to consolidate them, because right now our 8th Air Force is all scattered to hell at the moment, while I wait for those bombers to return. Now, this might be a good turn to wait for them to return, because right now you can see here this little percentage here on the lower right-hand corner of the screen is 58%, which means that cloud cover, essentially overcast cloud cover in this northern sort of France, Belgium, Western Germany region is very, very heavy. You can see nowhere else is it above 25%. Nowhere else where we're likely to fly is it above 16%, or I guess maybe 19. So 58% effectively in Northern Europe is a concern. That's a lot of cloud cover. If we turn the cloud map on here, you can see England is basically socked in under heavy cloud cover all day. Now that's there's another problem with that. When you have very heavy cloud cover, that can also lead to raids being canceled. I could issue orders for a raid, the planes could start to try and form, and then they could basically say, hey, the weather's too bad, we're not going to go, we're going to stay home. And you'll go through that whole planning phase for no reason. Now, these clouds move around throughout the day, so it may not stay this socked in. But it does feel like right now with the current cloud cover, certainly AM strikes seem off the table. PM strikes, maybe it gets a little less overcast later in the day. But it doesn't seem like an ideal day to go in with major raids in Northern Europe, which is one of the reasons that the commander of the 8th Air Force at this time, oh my goodness, what is his name? I'm blanking on his name, but the first commander of the 8th Air Force who kind of stood it up and got it all ready was replaced, I want to say it was in late 43, early 44 by Jimmy Doolittle, because in part because, the Arnold, I believe it was, the commander of the U.S. Army Air Forces was not happy with the ready rate. No, LeMay commanded a division, but he didn't command the 8th Air Force at this time. But it was Arnold. It was Hap Arnold who commanded the entire Army Air Force, at least in Europe, and then his subordinate, who I can't remember. No, it was not Louis Brinson. Oh, I said Louis Brinson. But yeah. Anyway, I'm listening to a book right now on it, and I can't remember the damn guy's name. But in any event, started with an A. Yes, I believe so. Anyway, not really relevant to this episode here. So, bad weather over England, not a shocker. Now, one of the things you will notice here is that the overcast is 58%, but the forecast is for the overcast to stay between 10,500 feet and 16,000 feet. So that's what the forecast is here. I think if we go over here, it changes based on like the last place we clicked. Yeah, it does. Okay. So over here, it's at 900 to 2,800 feet, but only 20%. So it's a lower cloud cover. But if we go back over into France and sort of Belgium and the Ruhr area, 58% between 10,500 feet and 16,300 feet. That's not going to be great for strategic bombers that are likely to be up acres. That's it. But not likely to be the ideal for bombers who are strategic bombers bombing above that altitude, trying to see through cloud cover. But it does open up an opportunity for dive bombers. So I'm going to give this turn another turn for the bombers to sort of recover, get their aircraft back in order after the disastrous Regensburg and Schweinfurt raids where we lost over 60 bombers. But what we're going to do here is we're going to still try and poke at the German bear, if you will. We are going to go after fuel. So theoretically, if we're following history, our priority at this time for bombing is a combination of fighter installations and fuel installations. So, fuel that helps provide the German fighters their fuel so they could fly, and fighters obviously so we can try and gain some air superiority. Now, there are some fuel tanks throughout this region that we can reach with tactical air forces. So if we actually go here and we go to list targets and we go ahead and we see, by the way, I think the red ones are like various political required targets. So they basically represent like, these are targets that you at certain times will be forced to attack. So Overlord, for example, these would be targets that we would be forced to attack for supporting the invasion of Normandy. In the run up to Normandy, you can see it's most of the stuff here in France and Belgium. Obviously, you see like all the targets in Germany kind of go away. And then you can see a list of the different targets and you can filter by target types. We can also see that U-boat pens are another thing. That was actually the priority kind of up until around this point in history. It kind of changed, I believe, in like June. I think it was Operation or the Point Blank Directive, I believe, is when it shifted to more fighter attacking stuff. But you can see here another one of the required targets from time to time are these U-boat pens in sort of on the French coast. And then you've also got the U-boat pens and manufacturing facilities in Hamburg. And then there's other target types as well there that support U-boats. So you've got, I think U-boat factories. Oh, that's green. So U-boat pens, the higher priority. Then you get the V weapons facilities, which again, that's for supporting the British for political reasons against V weapon facilities here. There's not a lot of them right now. I assume more pop up later in the game. And then you've got Overlord and you've got Avalanche, which is the stuff down in Italy to support the invasion of Italy, which I'm kind of surprised we haven't been told we have to do that yet, because Italy is, that campaign is coming up very soon. But one of the other primary targets here is, I believe red is the highest priority, yellow second highest priority, and green is the third priority. And then stuff below that is sort of tertiary priority. So you get like Balkans, radar sites. There's tons of radar sites. And then airfields are kind of, and area bombing is sort of its own little thing. And port bombing is sort of its own little thing. But fuel factories are a high priority target. Fuel storage is a high priority target. And with my inability to probably strategically bomb Europe today because of the weather, we're looking for fuel tanks. Now, we've already been kind of waging an unofficial campaign against fuel, at least one that I haven't talked a lot about on this. You can see we've been bombing the fuel storage facilities near Rotterdam, and we've basically completely destroyed the tanks at Valderen, and then pretty badly damaged the tanks at Pernis Petroleum, 62% damage there, 99 at Valderen. We've also bombed 3 storage tanks in and around Amsterdam. You've got 99 damage at KN Strumbot. You've got Amtex, which is at 98 damage, and Municipal Petroleum, which is at 100% damage. And these are pretty big facilities, capacity 4, capacity 1, and capacity 2. So decent anyway, not really big. But Pernis is 3, and then Valderen is 2. And then if you go like into the heart of Germany, stuff gets bigger. Hamburg, this was the fuel storage here was a major target. before the game starts. But you can see these obviously much larger capacities, 8, 8, 8. You've got a bunch of undamaged fuel near Wilhelmshaven, near Emden, much larger capacities. But I can't reach those this turn with the current, strategic situation with the weather the way it is. So what I'm actually going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to strike the only fuel target that is in my range, which is down here near France and near Paris. And I can do that with tactical bombers. So we've already planned this mission out. It's 3 squadron, 237 escorts, 186 bombers. That is a lot of aircraft for a not huge target. Actually, let's go back. I meant to click that. So if we go here, we go ahead and hit modify raid. We can take a look at this thing. It is just west of Paris. It is the only fuel storage sort of in France that we haven't hit yet. Or actually, I guess the rest were in Belgium and Holland. But you've got a capacity 3 Bailey's petrol just west of Paris. And the reason we're doing this is you can see we've got 186 Typhoon 1Bs. Fighter bombers are going to be the attacking wave. And then we've got over 200 fighter escorts, mostly Spitfires with a few Mustangs included. We are doing this because dive bombers and fighter bombers don't need to bomb from 18,000 feet. They actually specialize in bombing at much lower altitudes. You have to get in above at 10,000 or your bomber won't dive bomb. They will glide bomb. A glide bombing attack is much less accurate than a dive bombing attack. And so what we will do with the Typhoons is we'll bring them in at 10,100 feet, which puts them 400 feet below the overcast cloud cover and should hopefully allow them to hit this target very effectively. I don't know if 186 bombers is ideal. To me, it feels like overkill, especially because you're going to be much more accurate at lower altitudes than you would otherwise be. But I also don't really know where else to attack with them. I don't know that fighter bombers are very effective at attacking actual factories. Probably effective at attacking rail depots, I would guess. But I don't have a reason to attack those rail depots. And so I guess we're just going to send them in like that, and they'll come in, hopefully under the cloud cover with a good amount of escorts. And if the enemy tries to intercept them, that's our primary focus. That's our main raid in Northern Europe today. We're going to give most of the rest of the aircraft the day off. Now, I will say this is the 3rd turn in the game. In our previous video, we just showed the first turn. We just showed the August 17th turn. I did an August 18th turn, which had some tactical aircraft doing stuff. We had some B-26s and B-25s operating in Northern Europe. We hit those fuel tanks that I mentioned kind of for a second time. We hit them 2 days in a row at Amsterdam, the turn we showed you, and then the turn we didn't. And then we also hit the facilities at Rotterdam. So we'll give the B-26s and B-25s a day off now that they've been active for 2 straight days. We got to get their fatigue levels down a little bit. And then the rest of this is mostly reconnaissance. So I know some of you had previously said, hey, recon's really important in this game. And it is. So you can see here we've got a bunch of reconnaissance flights going over a bunch of different aerodromes. They're coming in basically on the deck at about 500 feet. That dramatically lessens the likelihood that the enemy is going to intercept them with anything. But it does mean that they could potentially get shot down by flak. So that's what those guys are all going to do. In Italy, it's a little bit of a different story, and I'm not going to go over every single raid for the day because we're going to try and do this turn and then do another one and do a night bombing raid tomorrow because we're going to give the RAF the night off mostly. But you can see here we've got reconnaissance raids or missions on a bunch of targets here throughout Italy, but then we also do have a bombing raid. We're targeting 3 power plants to the south of Cosenza just because they're the only things really in range. Like, most of my tactical air force in the Med doesn't have very long range. I can't do tactical airstrikes up and toward the core of Italy at this time because they're all based back here in Sicily and even some in Tunisia, so they don't have the legs to do that and be escorted. And I don't want to send them in unescorted. So I'm basically, the only reason I'm bombing the power plants, even though power plants, if you hit them all, can be a very effective target in shutting industry down. It's hard to do that because there's a lot of them, but they can be an effective target. But the only reason I'm hitting these guys is I want to bomb something, I got to give them something to do, and these targets are in range. So we're going to go ahead and bomb these guys. We're going to bomb the 29th Panzer Grenadier Troop again. We've kind of bombarded them 2 days in a row. They're into the yellow. Their disruption's fairly high. We'll keep hitting them as long as we can just because they're troops within range. And then we also are going to bomb fuel storage facilities near Bari. We're going to bomb recon an airfield here near Toronto. And then we've got 2 different B-17 strikes going at the fuel storage facilities near Naples. 64 B-17s at Bennett Petrol, which is a capacity 3 oil facility. And then 64 B-17s at AGIP NAFTA, which is also a fuel storage facility next to. So these 2 are going to kind of go in slightly different flights, but very similar. And actually, if we look at those raids, you will see we have a considerable or a decent amount of escorts. So we've got 84 escorts going to the flight to NAFTA, 45 escorts going to the flight to Bennett. And these are escorts that should be able to cover the bombers the whole flight in. So we've got 15 P-38s, 14 P-38s, 15 P-38s, and a single P-38. So we've got 45 P-38s going in with these guys. These guys are coming in at 18,000 feet. Cloud cover starts at 11,000, goes to 12. So if the overcast is there, we won't see anything. It'll be between us and the target, but only 16%. So a pretty decent chance that they get through. And then the other raid, the 97th, is going in right next to it. 64 B-17s again. I don't love that I'm using 46 P-39C Airacobras. Maybe we should reconsider that. They're not a very effective aircraft to use, but I don't have a lot of, like, they're delayed. They're joining 20 minutes in. So they pick the guys up just south of Capri and then can cover them the rest of the way, or at least should be till they're almost out of danger. We've got 16 Spitfire or 32 Spitfire 8s that are covering most of the way. They don't quite get all the way back. And then we've got 4 P-38Hs. These guys, again, these are kind of at the extremists of our ability to escort with anything. So like if I choose Warhawks off the bat, you can see these guys can't even, they can get not even to the target. I could choose a delay, right, to try and get them there with the Warhawks, but they don't have the range based on where they're based to get there. So these guys are not going to make it. The L also doesn't have much better range. They're actually based further back. They haven't even flown yet. So long-winded way of saying I'm using the P-39s because I have to, which is funny because they're bad high escort. Like they're bad aircraft at flying at high altitude. Frankly, so is the P-38. Like none of these aircraft have good superchargers for high altitude flying, but I don't want the bombers going in unescorted. So they are going in as is. Those are most of the raids. We're going to do a planning mission here in a second for something I haven't planned yet, but you can see here there's the power mission. We've got 45 tactical bombers there, 35 dive bombers going in on the troops here, 32 going in on the central power station, and 27 going on the right power station. All these guys do have escorts. It's close enough range that they can. We also have a night bombing raid on on Rome tonight. 99 Wellingtons coming in to London with the RAF. And then we have a couple other things going on in Northern Europe. Maybe I'll talk about this a little bit more in the later part of the stream because I do want to talk about diversionary strikes, but I don't want to give the Luftwaffe the night off. So like I'm giving the RAF the night off mostly, but I am sending in some aircraft that are like radar night fighters and like radar jammers, to fly into Germany. Not those guys, but we've got a flight going to Berlin, which have 6 Mosquito. Are these night fighters or RCMs? Night fighters. So we've got 6 night fighters going into Berlin, hopefully to draw them up so that they think there's a raid. So they kind of cause the German air forces to take off. And then we've got 6 more going into the Ruhr. These are Halifax RCMs. So these guys are going to be doing radar jamming, dropping chaff, doing things that'll hopefully make it look like there's a big raid going to Cologne. Again, to try and pull up all of the German fighters at night so that they don't get the night to sleep in, right? Because fatigue is a thing. So that's always something to kind of keep in mind. You want your crews to be well rested before they fight. You don't want the enemy to be well rested. You want the enemy to be fatigued because that in Grigsby games is sort of one of those things that has a dramatic effect on how effective you are bombing. Is not just bombing, but also just fighting and fighter pilots fighting and all those things is fatigue. So you can see here every unit has a fatigue value. Most of mine are pretty low right now. We do have a couple that are over 10. Like once you get over 10, I feel like that's where things start getting a little bit dicey. But most of my guys, they've had at least a day off in many cases, and they're not too tired. Still decided, the morale on some of these units still not great. Some of the B-17 groups who went to Schweinfurt have already regained a lot of morale, but there are still some pretty low ones. Below 60 is not ideal. We've even got one unit down at 50. But overall, just kind of, again, giving them the day off, mostly because the weather's terrible in northern Europe. Now, one of the other things, how specific and diverse are the factories? No, not radio rifle. Ammo factories. So like if we go to list targets, these are the type of targets. So you've got aluminum factories, oil storage, oil refinery, chemical factory, synthetic fuel, ball bearings, electric power, which provides electricity for all these factories to run. If you knock all the electric power out, then all the factories basically die. Steel factories like steel mills and stuff like that, rubber, aircraft, engine factories. Every single aircraft requires a multiple. So an aircraft factory basically builds the frame of the aircraft. The engine builds the engine. The avionics build the avionics. If avionics or engines are not produced, doesn't matter how many aircraft frames you make, you don't have a flying aircraft. So that's kind of where things get more detailed, is like on the aircraft side. You've got armaments, which sort of represents a catch-all of bullets, artillery, that kind of stuff. U-boats, V-weapons, U-boat pens, where the U-boats are actually stored between missions. V-weapons sites, where the weapons are launched from versus where they're produced. Rail yards, which transport goods and materials all throughout the entire country. And then ports, which kind of do the same. So you can also, like, if you destroy the rail yard in a city, it might produce a bunch of stuff that just sits there and waits because it has no way to transport to where it's trying to go. But with that being said, we are going to do a couple of missions that we're going to plan here. Let's go ahead and get rid of the show paths. We already have some recon flights that are going to be going out, but listen, we're going to be attacking Italy soon, right? Like it is August. What is it again? August 19th. The invasion of Italy starts, is it like September? I think it's like September 13th for the main part of the invasion, but then you've got like a minor part that starts in the southern tip on like the 3rd of September or something like that as kind of a diversion. So we're going to be attacking Italy very, very soon. We do not have air superiority in Italy. The Salerno landings and the Sicily landings prior were not like completely uncontested from the air. So our goal is obviously to wipe out the Luftwaffe, wipe out any threats to the invasion before the invasion occurs. We have a few bases where we've got good intel, good recon that we know the enemy has fighters within range where we can hit them. The first is Reggio di Calabria, which is down here in the south. That has 38 fighters. We've got 38 fighters at Fabrizia Airfield. We have 96 fighters at Kronton Airfield. And so we're going to want to do something about those guys, right? Like we want to destroy as many of those guys as we can. Now, historically, the RAF did not like to strafe airfields at this time. I think it changes after D-Day, but like before D-Day, it wasn't super popular in the RAF to say, let's go send, and they did this a bit in 42, I believe it was, but I think they kind of got away from it. So I think they got away from it a little bit, but historically, the RAF, what they wanted to do was there were missions, there were bombing raids on airfields, usually using tactical air forces like 2-engine bombers, other things like that. And the intent of those raids, one was to just do what damage you could to stuff on the ground, but two was really to draw enemy fighters up into the air and defeat them in the air. I'm assuming part of that logic is you can destroy an aircraft on the ground, but if you destroy it on the ground, the pilot's still alive. Meanwhile, you're exposing your own pilot to considerable risk to flak. If your pilot is strafing an airfield and he gets hit by flak and his plane's going in, pretty much best case scenario, he's wounded or whatever, but he's captured because you're over hostile territory. So you might strafe and destroy a plane on the ground. The enemy pilot's safe. Your pilot's gone. Worst case scenario, your pilot's dead. And so that's not a great trade-off. Like a 1-to-1, that is not a win. Now, if you If you can do like 10-1, maybe that's a win, but like 1-1, that is not a winning scenario. So they didn't do a lot of that. That changed, my understanding, is later in the war. I don't think there's a lot of great histories, frankly, of 42, 43 in the tactical air forces outside of like individual campaigns, like maybe Dieppe. But just something to consider. So what we're going to do here is we're going to launch a sweep on this airfield here, Kronton, which has 96 fighter aircraft. So we're going to do the opposite of history. We are going to make a play for attacking the enemy at their base on the deck. So we're going to try and come in here and knock out these enemy aircraft on the ground. Remember, we've got air raids coming in on these 3 power plants here. We've also got air raids on these troops here. So we also want to kind of try and, if we can shoot down these enemy aircraft as they try and take off to scramble against us. That is definitely a possibility. Now, I believe my airstrikes are coming in at 10 o'clock. So we will time this sweep to start a little before 10. So we'll start it at 9:40. So hopefully they get in there and they're, at the airfield by the time these other flights are picked up on radar. And we are going to go ahead and pick a lead unit, and we're going to do some damage, hopefully, to the enemy on the ground. I don't really know. I guess we could go with the longer range. We could go with the Warhawks. These guys haven't flown yet. P-40 is a decent ground attack aircraft. And again, these guys are further back, haven't flown yet. So actually, these 2 groups don't have enough ready aircraft right now. They just transferred to their new bases on Sicily, I believe it was. But we'll go with the P-40Fs. And then we'll add fighter escorts. So we'll have 74 aircraft coming in here. Why is there a delay? But these guys can all make it. You can see the green. They can make it all the way to the airfield and back. Close escort. So we've got 74 of these guys. What are they flying with anyway? Does it tell me? I might have to. Doesn't give me their loadout. I wish the game gave you their actual mission loadout. I don't think there's a way to see that. I think I've got to actually go to the unit, but I'm pretty sure they're carrying like 500-pound bombs. We'll have them come in kind of on the deck, so not quite on the deck, but we'll have them come in at say 10,100 feet. Now this is called a fighter sweep, right? So they're not technically like considered a bombing raid, but it is a bombing raid because what'll happen is they'll fly here. If the enemy has aircraft in the air, then they'll engage them. They'll sweep them out of the way. If the enemy doesn't have any aircraft here, what they'll do is they'll say, well, shoot, we see aircraft down there on the ground. We're going to dive in and attack them. So it's kind of like a targets of opportunity situation of if we see them in the air, we will fight them. If we don't, then we will dive on them and we will attack them there. Now, frankly, this airfield, 96 planes, that's a lot. 74 aircraft sweeping. My experience with sweeps, not that effective. I can do more damage than that. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and set 2 strikes on that airfield to try and really crush those guys. Because if I can get like 40 or 50 aircraft, if I can get like 40 or 50 aircraft destroyed on the ground, that will be a huge win for us. And I'm piloting this strike to avoid the enemy ground units and airfields, hopefully to avoid as much flak as we can. So we'll have another group come in. Say the other group will come in about 10 minutes later. And the other thing is if the enemy starts scrambling during our raid, we will intercept them on takeoff and do a lot more damage that way. But we'll have a second raid come in here, and we will make this one with Kitty Hawks. So these guys are going to be British squadrons. So they'll come in here. Go ahead and add more of them. Can these guys all reach? Some of these guys can't. They're too far away. You can see the distance to the actual formation point is this range item there. So it kind of tells you how far away they are. Okay. All right, these guys can make it. So we'll go with these 2 groups here of 24. That's 64 aircraft. Let's also add the rest of these Kitty Hawk groups. So we're going to go in with 108 aircraft on this second strike. That's going to come in a little bit behind the first and hit them with 108 aircraft at Kronton Airfield. Again, almost 100 aircraft on the ground there. So that is definitely a primary target. We will also hit some of these other closer airfields. Fabrizia has 38, and we don't see actually any indication of enemy flak. So that seems like that could be a very vulnerable field. If they don't have much flak coverage there, that could be a huge win for us. So let's go ahead and pick one of these other groups that's further away. This airfield is closer, so these guys can reach the field. So go ahead and strike that. And we'll go with, again, as many of these further out aircraft as we can, because most of these guys haven't flown yet. You can see NA, 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 and they haven't flown because they can't reach most of the places we've been fighting due to longer range. But in this case, they can. So we'll go ahead and hit these guys with a huge fighter sweep of 164 aircraft against this particular group. Same time as the other strike going out to Kronstein Airfield. We'll also hit Reggio de Calabria, 38 fighters. They do have a decent amount of flak. We're going to shift the sort of entry point for these guys down a bit. I'd rather shift it more. Whatever. So we'll do that. We'll send in another Spitfire group here. Well, that's most of my aircraft. The other thing is fighters can actually fly 2 missions in a day. So if we wanted to do like an afternoon strike, we could. So keep that in mind. If we wanted to do like a day and a night strike, we could. Although the second strike, you'd be dealing with much higher fatigue. So that's another thing to consider. So we'll send 112 aircraft. And on this one, so you got 112, 160 or so. I can't remember exactly. And then we've got like 170 going here. I think that's pretty much all the airfields that have considerable number of enemy fighters that are in my range. I could do a fighter sweep here as well. Are all these guys at 6? I need to go back and double check the timing on this, but we'll do a fighter sweep here. This airfield has more flak. I believe the bomb here means they have a bomb loadout too, so they will bomb the target if the enemy doesn't rise to meet them. Yeah, screw it. Send the 6. Let's also send the. Oh no, we're not gonna. We can't do that because they're not in the same. Okay, so we're gonna do that. Why are these guys coming in at 500? Oh, these guys are coming in because they're coming in for a raid I canceled, aren't they? All right, that's why. So let's put them up there. We'll also set the timeout to. We'll say 9:50, 10 minutes before the other strikes. All right, let me go ahead and review these guys then. 10,000 feet, 1006 over target. 110, 4, okay. Because if you come in at like 500 feet, that's. Oh, it doesn't tell me the. Oh, it does. Okay. So, okay. All right, that's good. So we're going to have a bunch of fighter sweeps in the morning in Italy. No, I mean, aircraft are going to have the defects that real aircraft have. So I don't think there's a quality risk of production. I don't think anyway. Meanwhile, let's also do some recon on those particular fields after the fact. So we're going to do a late morning or afternoon recon flight, 500 feet, which is below radar basically. And we'll go ahead and do some recon flights over these guys. Just I don't know if that like increases the effectiveness of like knowing what happened, but might as well. Feels like we should do a BDA, right? Bomb damage assessment after the fact. So I'll just quickly. Oh, God damn it! I didn't mean to do 10 o'clock. I gotta manually adjust that one again. I don't like how it like if you cancel a raid and then the next raid you plan, it goes into that time slot like that. That seems silly. Okay. Let's avoid those targets. There we go. This is what I get for fiddling with the stuff after, you know, between not recording and then like canceling stuff and moving stuff around. Here. All right. All right. So I think that's going to do it for this turn's planning. And I guess we'll just go in and we'll see what happens once we resolve. We'll get the super sexy combat resolution. And I'm obviously being sarcastic with that. Okay, we will leave message level on 1 because I don't have a ton of raids going in. So we'll get a bunch of early morning recon flight alerts and then hopefully mostly just the sweeps and maybe the raid on the oil facility near Paris. So you can see here the time moving along. You can see those are all recon flights pretty much going out at 6 in the morning. You get a little alerts, targets visible. You can kind of get a sense of that if we put the cloud cover over here. So some of these guys, the cloud cover is going to be a problem. Although the recon flights, I believe, are all coming in under the clouds. So they're all at like 500 feet. I decided to go with low altitude to avoid radar, which means even if you see clouds here, they're probably coming in under the clouds. Those are some pretty sweet emotes there, Jam. So we should have pretty good recon flights here. The cloud cover is kind of annoying to look at. Just kind of relevant when you're trying to see like, why can't my guys see the targets here? And that's why. You don't see the Germans generally scramble against individual recon flights. If they have aircraft already airborne, they may attack. And recon planes are very vulnerable to attack. But if you're just sending like individual planes out, Germans are typically not going to scramble fighters for that. They will typically reserve their strength for what they think the missions are. And so, you know, typically if you send your recon out first before the bombers get airborne, not a major risk. If you send them out in the evening, you got to make sure there's enough of a buffer there that any fighters that were scrambled for the actual bombing raids earlier in the day are likely to be out of fuel and on their way back to base or landed already, because that's when you can really run into problems. And if you try and do it at the same time as your air raids, I just don't see that there's a reason to do that, but you will lose a lot of recon planes. Also, your recon planes can just get shot down by flak too. So lower altitude, obviously higher risk, but generally I believe lower altitude also means more effectiveness, both for bombing, but also for taking pictures and stuff like that. So a lot of these recon, I assume these recon flights should mostly be done. We should be getting pretty close to that. I don't think I've seen a single one say it's not visible though. I do a lot of recon flights on airfields. I'm not sure what can D-Day happen in this campaign? Can you influence its location? You do not influence its location, Lord. D-Day will happen where it historically happened. The Italian invasions will happen historically where they happened. What your air campaign can do to influence the game is if you are destroying the Luftwaffe more rapidly, if you're influencing the war in ways around, you know, the enemy's industrial output or air superiority, then you can cause D-Day to happen sooner. Although maybe I need to look at that. I'm not sure if the landings occur sooner. I think what you can actually influence is the breakouts. So I believe the landings actually take place on the historical dates, but then what happens is the breakout of Normandy could be accelerated by, you know, conditions being influenced by your air power, and likewise it can be delayed. So you can see these air raids are coming in here. The first sweep on Calabria, the fighters found no enemy opposition in the air, and so now they are diving on the field and strafing the enemy aircraft on the ground. I wonder if fighter sweeps are a little OP in this game, but because you can see we're destroying a lot of aircraft on the ground real easily. And so far, no sign of enemy flak being super heavy. Now, admittedly, I don't think these enemy airfields have a ton of flak. You can see we just destroyed a 20 millimeter gun. We're also damaging some 109 BF-109s, but I do feel like maybe the fighter sweeps are a little OP because, again, I do know that the RAF was typically very shy of doing fighter sweeps on the ground, at least at this period of the war, due to fear of flak losses. Who knows? Maybe Italy is just sort of a unique situation where they just come in like right over the coast and they're in good shape. But flak losses here are not so bad to pretty much non-existent. I was debating doing a large-scale P-47 sweep with the Mighty Ace fighter escorts against some of the bases in Belgium, but decided against it because if we are going to do a bombing raid in the next day or two, I don't want those pilots to be exhausted. When you fly at lower altitudes, it has a higher fatigue penalty on you. I believe above certain altitudes does too. But like if you come in on the deck or you strafe and bomb and things like that, it's a higher amount of damage done to your fatigue level. Meanwhile, you can see the second airfield here a little bit further north appears to mostly be Italian aircraft. We are strafing Arites, and we're damaging several of them on the ground and also destroying several of them on the ground. Now, part of the reason these sweeps are doing so much damage also is, remember, we sent in 100+ aircraft to kind of roam over this airfield, so that's something you got to consider. Meanwhile, also looks like the airfield over here, Kronton, the 99 air fighters here, our fighter sweep, the first fighter sweep with 70 P-40s, is almost on top of that airfield. So we've got the B-17s. They've taken off. This is what would be most likely to draw these aircraft out. And so our fighters are almost there. I'm assuming we will get there before the Germans get to altitude. So if we don't get them on the ground, we may get them while they're taking off. But we're doing a lot of damage to these Italian squadrons on the southern tip of the boot so far. By the way, DJ Diplomat, thank you for the follow about 15 minutes ago. 7H, thank you for the follow about 30 minutes ago. And Lars, thank you for the resub. I really appreciate that. 16 months now, if you're still around. Also, keep in mind, this airfield, we are doing a lot of damage, but the recon said there were no enemy flak pieces there. So certainly a light amount of flak on these fields. There can be very heavily defended airfields. I strafed one in between the two turns, and I think I lost I destroyed 5 aircraft on the ground and just lost 5 to flak. So, that's not a good trade, as we were discussing earlier. They did do an update jam last year. It was a beta. They did a beta patch last year, and they did another one. I think they have a beta patch currently available right now. We just lost our first aircraft to flak. So they are doing updates, but it's obviously the graphics and the UI, I'm sure, are all hard coded, and they're not gonna make major changes there. Meanwhile, Noah, thank you very much for the sub. Also appreciate that. All right, so we are also destroying 20mm guns and anti-aircraft machine guns, and those are all things that the factories produce. So as you destroy them, the Germans do have to replace them. We are losing a couple more Spitfires there to flak, and now it looks like the P-40s are over that Kronton airfield. We've got the second flight coming in behind him also. You can see this one has F-190s on the ground there. They're damaging 3, damaging another 3, destroying 1. F-190s destroyed on the ground are a gold mine. Also, considering if we damage them, then they can't scramble against these B-17s that are going toward Naples. So that may also greatly reduce at least the threat, or maybe disorganize the enemy flight before they can get formed up. There's also some Italian heavy fighters. The ROs are Italian heavy fighters. We've got some RE-2001s. This game in VR would be amazing. I don't know. Map Planner could be fun. But yeah, so we're getting a good deal of enemy aircraft on the ground here. You can see so far the initial reports are 35 enemy aircraft destroyed against 2 lost. Now, what I will say also is, in this book I'm listening to on Audible, apparently the Germans were producing around 2,100 fighters a month at this period. So production is high. That's the reason I say, is it really worth it to strafe them? Because the problem was generally not, hey, we don't have enough planes. The problem was we don't have enough pilots. And while destroying planes on the ground is a very effective thing, for today to protect these bombers going north, if they can just keep replacing their aircraft, unless we're killing their pilots, it's not as big of a win. It's still a problem. It's still something that prevents them from building up strength while we do build up strength. But it is something to consider. I believe German fighter production peaked in 1944 at around 3,500 planes a month. Or maybe that was total aircraft produced. But that would be over 100 aircraft a day. So when you consider we've destroyed 35 plus now. Yeah, but are we destroying more than 100 a day? Are we destroying more than 75 a day? Because if we're not doing that, then we're not really making them weaker, right? You notice some of the damage and destroyed is white and yellow. Any idea what that means? Yeah, so if a target has green around it, that basically means it is operating at, if not 100% effectiveness, nearly 100% effectiveness. It is not very badly damaged. If a target is yellow, it means it has moderate damage. So you can see this airfield has 23% damage. This area, which is sort of this rail capacity or this urban area, has 25% damage, so it's yellow. If you see orange up here at Bada Paliga, you can see that means the damage is I guess doesn't look any heavier, but at 25 and 25, if you have red, it means it's basically, if not totally destroyed, greatly reduced its effectiveness. So you can see now we're up to 60 aircraft strafing. I like Masters of the Air. I thought it was a very good book. If you're interested in the U.S. command, I've got the bombers and the bombed just sitting like 3 feet from me, which I need to read because that's more of a holistic, like the entire campaign. I think Masters of the Air is my recollection. Doesn't talk too much about the British. It mentions it a bit, but not a ton. Yeah, I mean, pilot killing priority would be preferred if you hit the enemy fighters either on takeoff or landing. Enemy aircraft are very vulnerable on landing. It's hard to time that right, though, right? Like, you got to time it perfectly. Also, apparently there were some German fighters. It looks like there's 3 Bf-109s that I think took off this airfield at Vibio Valentia. Oh. Okay, it says they have 84 aircraft based at this airfield here at the southwestern tip of Italy. We didn't think they had any previously, so that is new. That's new intel. Keep that in mind. Aircraft move between these airfields constantly, so it is important that you keep that you keep doing recon, because you're not going to know where the enemy aircraft are if you're like a week out of date. Fighter groups move around fairly frequently, and that's a problem. I wasn't sure how much AI units moved around, but obviously they moved 84 fighters down to this field, and they didn't have any there before, so... means the enemy has 3 Bf-109 Stab JG-53s. I'm assuming these guys are climbing to either intercept the Spitfires on their way out or the B-17s up here. Fighters there. What is Kronton at? We're still the second group. The 100 aircraft have arrived at Kronton, and now they're continuing the chaos on that airfield. I would guess we'll get close to 100 enemy aircraft destroyed. The British did have aircraft wait around airfields. So did the Americans, too, with the purpose of attacking the enemy on landing. I believe that was more of a late war tactic. I think that's like mostly post D-Day. I don't think the British were doing that in 1943. Frankly, I don't think their aircraft in 1943 had enough fuel to be able to just loiter over enemy airfields. But that was certainly a tactic that was very effective against like the ME 420. 420? I'm thinking of the jet. Is that 262? What the fuck am I? 420. Wow. The ME 262. Yeah. So like that was a tactic, as you would like, you would hit it on landing because that's when it would be the most vulnerable. I have watched the Masters of the Air show. 3 RO-57s destroyed on the ground. I think the Italians only made like 100 of those things. I sounded like Yoshi. Okay. Anyway, but yeah, I have watched Masters of the Air. I think we just recorded our newest episode of the Single Malt Strategy podcast, Tortuga, Wolfpack 3, 4, 5, and Finish last night. So I think we will touch on Masters of the Air in our next episode, which hopefully we're trying to increase the pace of episodes so that it's not like 4 a year, but it's more like 1 a month. That would be ideal. So we may do like a special episode just dedicated to that. Because, it's very topical and you don't get very many series like that. It's not like a film review show, but we've all been watching it. So I just watched episode 4 last night. So I'm up to date. I watched episode 3 and episode 4 last night. So I'm now up to date. But overall, I've enjoyed it so far at a high level. There are issues I have with it. I think it's kind of the name is a great name for the book, so it makes sense for the show. But I wouldn't really say it's based on the book in the sense that the book's scope is so much larger than what the show's is. Like they're not really trying to tell the story of the whole war. Obviously, they're only telling it of one group, which is it's fine. Like it wouldn't be practical to try and do every single, try and have someone in every group. In any event, I think most of our sweeps are done. You can see we've lost 12 aircraft. The enemy's lost 103. I assume that's a pretty favorable ratio. Like if we lose 12 pilots and they lose none, but they lose 103 aircraft, I would think that's a good ratio. We're still losing more aircraft, though. We just had a hurricane destroyed over this German armored group by flak. But we are trying to bomb these guys and suppress these guys. Because if you damage enemy infantry or enemy ground units, that's one of the ways you can speed up breaking out of the beachhead. So once the troops land at Salerno and a beachhead is established at the Volturno line or wherever it is, oh boy, we will then, the strength of the German resistance influences when you break out. Is it worth getting Apple TV for? I already had Apple TV, so I don't know the answer to that. Sorry. My wife watched one of the shows on it, and I enjoyed Ted Lasso. I thought the earlier seasons were better, but I watched that a couple weeks back or a couple months back, and I just never got around to canceling it before Masters of the Air came out. I don't know if I'll keep if I'll keep Apple TV after Masters of the Air is done. I don't know. There's like a couple of shows that are on there that I really like, but I don't know that they have enough stuff to like keep it permanently. So I guess we'll see. One of the other things you can do is if you haven't had an Apple TV subscription before, I believe they have like a free trial for like a month or at least a week. So you could certainly, another option would be wait until it's done and then just get the free trial and watch it through that way. Meanwhile, our Typhoons are bombing over France, over that oil facility in heavy cloud cover, but they're coming in under the clouds. So you can see it does say they are bombing. It doesn't say they can't find the target. If they couldn't find the target because of the cloud cover, it would say can't see target, can't find target. But in this case, they're bombing and presumably effectively. Doesn't look like the enemy scrambled. Like, oh, there's some fighters over here. There's 9 F-190s out to the northeast. But the German daytime fighters in Northern Europe are getting a pretty good break today. So that's maybe not ideal, but just the reality of it. Also, we lost a Typhoon there to flak. But you can see a bunch of Italian fighters have scrambled off some of those airfields where we were doing the strafing. There's another fighter group that's scrambled. Okay, so the Germans are scrambling some fighters in France. But I think maybe some of these guys are getting shot down while they take off. Or certainly our fighter sweeps are destroying these guys. Like, these guys are bouncing the enemy with these fighters. So I don't know if the Italian sort of intercepting of our B-17 seems to have largely failed. Also, our escorts here of the Typhoons getting into it with D-520s, which are captured French fighter aircraft. They were some of the French best fighters in 1940 when the Germans invaded, and the Germans sort of pressed them into service. Also, the Mustang 1, I believe, is the P-51A. I think that's the one, is it with the Allison engine? The low-altitude Mustang, basically. I think the Merlin comes in with the P-51B, I think. And now I've got P-38s dueling with 109s here, escorting these B-17s on the way to Naples. So the Germans did press through, and they got a squadron of aircraft in to attack the bombers. You could see one P-38 was destroyed, one ME-109 was destroyed, and you can see the losses are increasing here. We're up to 23 aircraft lost. The enemy's up to 112 aircraft lost, but the last 10 or so of their aircraft, I believe, have all been shot down. You can see we just shot down a D-520 there. Mustang doesn't seem very good, and we're not even at very high altitude. Like, we're at 10,000 to 12,000 feet there. I would think that's below where like the superchargers are not effective, but they don't seem to be very effective escorting those guys. Hey, First Lieutenant William Livesey, your plane crashed, but you're okay on the landing. So good for you. Good day. Meanwhile, Spitfire's destroying our 2005s. P-38's getting destroyed by some Italian aircraft. A lot of aircraft scrambling at near Naples. See, I thought the P-51 was generally good below 10,000 feet or around there, even with the bad engine. Oh, yeah, I haven't seen Silo. I saw previews for it. I've watched some clips of For All Mankind. I've never watched it. I thought it was a cool concept, but I heard it kind of goes off the rails a bit for better or worse. All right, P-38s are attacking our 2001s. Destroyed one there. I don't know that we're going to watch the entire turn in this, or the next turn in this slow period here. It looks like they're bombing the petro facilities in Naples. A lot of fighters are being drawn in here. I'm hoping that the bombers suffered less because we swept over those southern airfields. Obviously, we couldn't reach these northern airfields like the ones up near Rome and things like that. But a lot of stuff going on here. I'm going to go ahead and speed things up a bit at this point. Most of the fighter sweeps are done, which is kind of what I wanted to see. The strategic bombing, you know, what's going to happen is what's going to happen. So let's go ahead and speed this up and get to the turn resolution here. And we'll see what the final results are. Our losses are steadily increasing. Probably aircraft that took flak damage and other things like that earlier on, kind of succumbing to their wounds as they head back. German aircraft losses also increased up to 130, so at least 30 of those were lost in the air. Or German and Italian. All right, so that's that. We still got some German aircraft sort of loitering. Here's our PM fighters or recon going out just to kind of check in on things, see where they ended up. Got another recon flight going to London because we've got a nighttime bombing raid going there here in a minute. Our recon flights over France to where that raid was. Looks like that petro facility was destroyed, so all that oil could have an influence on enemy air activities. So the way those storage facilities work, every airfield has a certain amount of fuel that it stores that support operations for their aircraft. As aircraft, you know, fly, they consume that fuel. And then, oh, nice. So look at all that air activity that my RCM aircraft are triggering. So the sweep out to Berlin definitely drew some German aircraft up. Our radar countermeasures definitely caused some aircraft to fly up here. So I don't know that it was quite as widespread of a diversion or being successful, but it definitely got a decent amount of enemy aircraft up in the air to come after us. And then meanwhile, we've got the raid going to Rome here. Some Italian night fighters trying to intercept on our way out. But radio activity basically just indicates like, hey, there's going to be a raid. There's air activity going on. Okay, so you can see some aircraft or some pilots are being promoted to take command of squadrons because the squadron commander was killed. And if we go to the action report, you can see here the biggest raid, the NAFTA raid here over Italy. The enemy lost 15 interceptors in the air. We lost 6 fighters, but no bombers. So the fighters did their job. The other raid here at Bennett, near Naples, not as effective. So the NAFTA raid destroyed the entire oil facility, capacity 400% damage. The Naples Bennett raid destroyed only 7%. So that is not much damage at all. That was not an anchored bombing raid. We lost 3 bombers of 64. We lost 8 fighters. The enemy lost 7 interceptors. PRAAF Kronton, we lost 7 aircraft. The enemy lost 4 interceptors. So not just aircraft on the ground, but 4 interceptors. So actually they must have tried to take off while we were sweeping. And so that was effective. You didn't see much other information here. So overall, that was kind of the air activity. But as I was saying, like every airfield has a certain amount of fuel. As sorties are flown or as raids occur and storage is destroyed, fuel has to be drawn from somewhere to replace it. Otherwise, those aircraft can't fly. The fuel that comes to the airfields comes from the storage facilities. The fuel that gets to the storage facilities comes from refineries and other things like that. So if you destroy the refineries, eventually the storage facilities will run dry. If you destroy the storage facilities, it influences how efficiently fuel can get to the airfields, and it can limit how they can fly there. So those are all things to consider. With that being said, that's going to do it for today's episode and our look at fighter sweeps and how they can be used in certain circumstances fairly successfully. But again, destroying pilots is different, and we didn't destroy many. We'll take a look at that in another episode and give a breakdown of pilots versus plane losses. But at the very least, we've certainly made some of these squadrons much less effective in a temporary sense, even if we didn't kill a lot of their pilots. And I think that's important if you consider we're trying to build up for the invasion of Italy. That being said, that's going to do it for today's episode. In our next episode on this series, we're going to look at bombing a major city with a night raid and a 1,000 bomber raid on Berlin, perhaps. However, that will be all we have time for today. So until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying once again, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, I'm out.